Hello everybody, I'm Ernesto Boado. I'm a blockchain developer for Aave. And yeah, today I'm going to make a presentation about the Flash Loans that is featuring our protocol and their composability in DeFi. And we did yesterday another one a bit more technical, but this one is going to be a more high-level picture of what are the Flash Loans, how is the ecosystem around the Flash Loans, use cases, applications, etc. So, first of all, a quick introduction. I suppose a lot of you already know what are the Flash Loans since the last 2 weeks that they become like really mainstream in the Ethereum ecosystem. To start, like the Flash Loans are uncollateralized loans borrowed and repaid in the same transaction. So it means that you don't need to deposit any collateral, but you still can borrow. In opposition to almost all the DeFi protocols out there that you need to have deposit the collateral and then borrow from there. No? So this is enabled by the property of the Ethereum blockchain itself, that is the atomicity. That means that everything that happens within the context of execution of one transaction, if it goes through, it goes through, but if it fails at some point, everything gets reverted. No? So what this means for DeFi, for the ecosystem, for the rest of the platforms, is that this brings a lot of composability and a lot of possibilities of interaction between one protocol and the other. So it can be understood as a building block for DeFi because it allows to build applications, tools, and whatever you can imagine around it. Something that is really important also on the Flash Loans is that it allows like something like high frequency movement of capital between DeFi decentralized applications. Unlike some other current cases of movement of capital that they depend on multi-block and over time getting yield, with Flash Loans this can be done in every transaction, potentially even in multiple transactions, even on the same block. So some good comparison will be like the high frequency trading in the traditional banking, of course with the limitations of the Ethereum blockchain. Another thing of the Flash Loans is that they kind of democratize the access to capital. This means that at the end of the day, you only need to execute a function in a contract that has funds. So the only resource necessary in advance is the knowledge of what to do with that capital. If you have a really good knowledge of how all the protocols are interconnected, which are the opportunities out there, you only need to implement a bot or do a direct transaction and get the profit. And everything this before, what it leads to, especially in this context of a hackathon, is that it's a huge boost for builders of DeFi applications, because now you know that you don't need to have any capital, so you can only spend time of understanding really well the ecosystem, having a really good idea of an application, and from there just getting profit. So yeah. Use cases of the Flash Loans, like one of the first platforms that implemented this Flash Loan feature with real usage is ours, Aave. And so this is still growing and it's really early to say these are the use cases. There will be a lot of more, but for example, one of the first is that these Flash Loans can be considered like a stress test of security of the DeFi ecosystem, because at the end of the day, you can kind of try to attack multiple platforms for free or really cheaply. So it brings like a lot of stress tests without needing any capital. You can do liquidations on over-collateralized systems. That is one of the main use cases that we thought about when we tried to introduce. Like, for example, you see that a loan is about to be under-collateralized in Compound, so you Flash Loan from Aave and you liquidate the loan on Compound without having the capital in advance. So there are multiple advantages for that. It can be used also for a lot of platforms that don't have, like ours, for example, don't have leverage in a native way. and because we are not a trading platform. But with these flash loans, you can actually do leverage, because you can flash loan and accumulate, and doing multiple transactions, you make the accumulation of capital. No? Another one that is quite general is the swap of currencies and positions between platforms. Positions will be like you can move CDPs or the exposure in one vault in MakerDAO from one currency to another. Potentially you can move a loan position from one DeFi platform to another, and etc. Even on exchanges there are a huge potential here. And of course the arbitrage. The arbitrage is the one that looks the most simple of all. It's like you just look for opportunities, exchanging in multiple steps between decentralized exchanges, and then you take the capital and you combine in multiple steps and get the profit. Yeah, and like I say, this is just the beginning, so way more will appear for sure. So yeah, one of the objectives of the talk is like presenting from our experience and from our internal analysis which are the models that works best, or the pros and cons of each model of applications implementing a flash loan feature. No? So starting for the most pure one, let's say, is like imagine a standalone pool, like a pool of funds that is built exclusively to doing flash loans. So people accumulate in a smart contract their funds in whatever currency or multiple currencies, and the only objective of those funds is that there will be some operator or some DAO or there are multiple models that will try to execute the transactions with those funds and give yield to the people that deposited in that fund. No? Pros of this approach, this is the general idea, and even people came with this idea 1 year ago, but the cons were quite high. Pros still there are, is like the simplicity of the code is noticeable, because at the end of the day it's just screw the funds in a contract and then define some rules that need to be respected, but the movement of capital is whatever the operators decide. There is always liquidity available to withdraw, because at the end of the day these funds are moved in one transaction, but at the end of the transaction they are in the pool, so you just put your funds there and then you can withdraw it at any point. That is quite important actually. And this is a bit more abstract, but there is an alignment of interests between the parties involved. This means that I am depositing in the pool to do flash loans, nothing else. It's like we really trust in the operator, so there is no subjectivity here. No? About the cons that actually were the ones that didn't allow for people to develop this idea further before is the main problem is this chicken egg problem on liquidity. That is basically that you need liquidity to get advantage of opportunities in the market, but how you attract that liquidity? Because at the beginning people will need to deposit a good amount in a fund and they will not have any revenue until there is an arbitrage opportunity or a liquidation or whatever. This can be a problem, and in our case we know it quite well because we have a borrowing platform that was P2P, and one of the main problems is that when you create when you offer to lend out funds, you need to deposit the funds, and while the funds are waiting, they are not getting any revenue. So you could have used the funds in another way. So the pool model is a bit better in that sense. So that is the main con of exclusive fund for this. The other is that the frequency of income is irregular because you depend on different market opportunities, liquidations, arbitrage, whatever. For now, at least, there is nothing like a continuous revenue, something that you can do block by block. You depend on multiple and complex variables. And there is another that is more related with the coordination, and is who decides which opportunities to take, or which is the business model of this standalone fund for flash loans. This boils down to make a DAO, or boils down to have some certain kind of centralization. So we could define it as a con, maybe as a pro, but is subjective also. So this is the purest model, but back in the days we also thought about some some product like this, but it was not so worth it. But we realized that the actually powerful model is when the flash loans are on top of money markets. What this means is that you build a DeFi protocol that has an underlying economic model like ours that is based on borrowing and lending capital in a pool way, and the profits are shared for all the depositors. And the flash loan is just an extra on top, so it's like a boost for giving profit to those depositors in a different way because it doesn't follow the same model as the borrowing lending model of interest rate, for example. No? That is the big advantage. Another pro, the pro is that you have a basic income for people that wants to do flash loans because at the same time they are depositing and those funds are being borrowed. And the liquidity doesn't come for the flash loans. The liquidity most probably comes from depositors that are allowed to borrow money, and flash loans are just a consequence, are another feature of the system, like nothing else. The cons of this is, for sure, there is more complexity on the system, and we know it quite well since the last two weeks, because once you introduce this feature in a set of smart contracts, the interconnection between the functions of those smart contracts become way more dangerous, because there is like a arbitrary release of capital, different movement, like you could interact with multiple functions of the protocol at the same time, so it introduces a complexity that you need to evaluate, and development gets a bit more difficult. Could be considered that there is an added risk because of the flash loans themselves, because even if you borrow out the money and in the same transaction you validate that you receive the funds back, at the end of the day the funds are going out. So it could be argued that it boils down, that some problem in the EVM in some particular cases could be problematic. No? So there is a bit of added risk, even if in practice is zero, let's say, more or less zero. And another con, and probably is the biggest one, is that there is constrained the liquidity available, because a lot of funds are borrowed out, so the funds that you can use are the ones available, are not borrowed at this point. So, for example, this is our platform, no? And what will be submitted to flash loan is, like in this case, imagine Ethereum, no? There is like 4 million in assets right now. And borrowed out, there are like almost 200K. So what you can flash in this case is the difference between the total liquidity and the borrowed out, so it will be 4 million. In the case of Ethereum, it's not a big deal, because Ethereum is used more as collateral to then borrow, for example, stable coins. But if you check, for example, DAI, you have 1.1 in total, borrow is almost everything, so you only have 200K to borrow out. So if you compare with a model like that is puristic, like the previous one, for sure it's not. You cannot flash so much in proportion. No? Yeah.
What happens if two people try to borrow at the same time? If they both try to take.
If they try to borrow, the problem is that nothing can happen at the same time. Like if you try to borrow, I try to borrow. What it means is that. Yeah, we submit a transaction, and one will go after the other, so the funds will be returned in the middle. So yeah, about our particular implementation of the flash loans, there are some specific details. Is that, like I said before, anybody can flash borrow the available funds, so the difference between the total liquidity minus the borrowed assets. In our case, the flash loans are enabled to all the assets in the protocol, so it's not only Ethereum, it's not only DAI, it's like every listed currency can be borrowed depending on the constraints of the liquidity. Then we chose a kind of simple approach in the implementation, really constrained, and in the sense that our implementation is basically we borrow out the money, and at the end of the function that executes this transaction, we check that the balance of the contract storing the funds is the same as it was at the beginning, plus a depositor's yield that is the next point. This depositor's yield is basically that from every flash loan there is a percentage that the person that did the flash loan needs to return back to the pool, and that the biggest part of that will go to the depositors as an extra income. And this is what I mentioned before of the boost of income in the depositors, that they are borrowing money, they are getting interest from that, but apart from that, every time there is a flash loan, the pool receives some income that gets also spread between the depositors. Something interesting with real numbers and how powerful could that be is like, imagine that you have here like the Ethereum, no? That have 4 million available to borrow. The interest that the depositors earn is really small, like 0.6%. But this is because the interest is always based in the utilization, like the difference in the available and the borrowed. But if you start doing flash loans of 4 million that are available, and imagine that you do a flash loan that gets a profit of, I don't know, 1%, for example. Or imagine a stream case in liquidation that can be potentially, imagine 10%. With 10%, you will get 400K in one transaction. And for the 400K, you will get 70% for the depositors, to split between the depositors. This will mean that in one transaction, maybe you are generating an interest of 20%. One transaction income. That is a stream case because it's a 10% and it's not a realistic. But if you put a 0.5%, it still is quite big amount. So this is really powerful when you have it on top of a money market, because the boost potentially could be even more important than the interest coming from borrowers. So just to give a bit of overview. And that also boils down to the liquidity available. It's important to have liquidity available, more proportion of liquidity available, and less optimized to less utilization rate, or it's important to optimize to more utilization rate and better interest for the borrower? It's a good question. But yeah, one thing about the flash loans, and probably this is the most known thing, is that
how is the interest rate on the flash loan calculated?
The interest rate of the flash loan, this depositor yield is hard-coded in the protocol. I mean, hard-coded. It can be changed, and right now, for example, is the 0.09% of the flash loan amount.
Okay.
So from there, still the 70% goes to the depositors, and the 30% goes to protocol fees that then gets burned for the token that is behind and that kind of stuff. But yeah, like it's 0.09%, and of that 70% goes as depositors redirection. No?
Is there like a calculated amount how this compounds at the moment?
No, it's the borrowed amount initially. Like it doesn't matter what you do in the middle. In the middle, if you get like the double, you need to get the 0.09 of what you borrow. It doesn't matter.
For the people who put liquidity into the pool, for example, if there would be like in every fifth block a flash loan taken out.
But you don't know. Yeah. No, it's not. It's completely dependent on that.
The calculation is basically like instantaneous interest accumulated. So like if you have 0.09%, you can consider like that 0.09% like an APR accumulated in instantaneously. Right? So it gets instantaneously added to the reserve as instantaneous interest, if you want to call it.
Yeah. But how much, if I put liquidity in your protocol, how much would it be in a year?
It depends. Of course, it depends on the volume of flash loans.
Yeah.
Of course, if there are 0 flash loans, it will be 0. If there are 10 million flash loans,
how many are at the moment, for example?
No.
In numbers, I don't know right now.
Depends on.
Probably will grow.
Yeah, depends on the growth of the product, right? So every time the calculation specifically works this way. Every time a flash loan is taken, we calculate like how much was the flash loan, how much is the current liquidity. We do the ratio between the two, and that is basically the accrued interest in that particular transaction, right? So it gets added to the reserve as a kind of instantaneous interest accrued. So it accumulates over time. Yeah.
But in terms of prediction, it's not so easy. Like
it's not possible.
But the other, actually, even the borrowing you cannot predict at all.
What we estimate usually is that until now, how much happened, and you can do a projection. Like if you keep that volume until the end of the year, and have like an approximate evaluation of what it could be. That is the best that we use to operate because, like Ernesto was saying, it's not like interest accrued per second, but it's something. So depends on the actual quality.
Yeah, but going on with this thing is like, as you know, this went mainstream like 3 weeks ago, and because these flash loans have like a dark side, no? And this dark side is like, it looks more like this actually, not like Darth Vader. And for me, it's not so dark side, let's be honest, but it's considered as that. And is how some protocols can be subjected to exploits because of the flash loans now. It's like protocols that before were safe because no attack vector had so much flexibility as the flash loans, where the liquidity comes instantaneous and it changes a bit of the rules. But now with real funds and with the feature of flash loans on top, stuff like that is allowed. That basically the exploit was that somebody took a flash loan from a platform, then they make an operation in Compound, that is a money market, then they trade. They create a trade position in another platform, BCX, then they crash a price in a decentralized exchange, and from all this combination they got a huge profit because at the same time there was a small bug in BCX in this case, and then at the end of the transaction they just returned the flash loan and they got, like, I think it was 350k in profit. But it was 350k without spending more than the gas cost of calling the function. So it was like...
Isn't that also the problem? That's where you should have some kind of limit, that put some limit on it, so you can't just come in and, risking just gas money, you can move so much money around and risk so much money out there. It's a new product and a new platform, so you think some kind of limit that you can put in there, percentage how much you can risk in the beginning. Just a
in which sense, the limit? I think
it's a new product, right? Flash is a new product. DEX has only been around for maybe 2 years. And you have to be very smart and clever, who knows how to technically work these things, able to come in and risk practically nothing to find vulnerabilities or whatever, market manipulation in the market. So that's why I think maybe the beginning should be at some kind of percentage on there, how much you can get in well. Because otherwise this could get worse than what you've done before.
Yeah, but I think the solution for that is not not on the flash loan side, because the flash loan is not a problem per se. The problem and putting a limitation on how much you can flash loan is not a problem. The limitation should be if you want to put the limitation, and it could be legit in some cases. I didn't evaluate more about that.
Something on exchanges or smart contract?
Okay. Sorry.
On the smart contract or the exchanges, on the DDX contract?
Yeah, that could be a solution.
Yeah,
but
because another, like one guy who mined the ETH, for example, on $1, he have the huge amount, and he can do the same without any flash loan. It will be a bit risky for him because maybe he will not be able to go out because it will be blocked on some exchanges, but he will go to the access and still it will be possible. Like flash loan don't introduce this attack in general. That's the DEX organization introduced.
Yeah, Peter, you can actually do
That's
some tasks without flash loan if you have the capital.
Right, but
If you're away.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, so far, I'm not just going to have the capital, you have to have the technical knowledge how to do that. I mean, this is not an easy thing to do.
But there might be technical whales out there.
can we discuss better, because we have a bit constraint. I will finish this and then we discuss. So yeah, just to wrap around, like future cases of flash loan, this is important, and is like future of the flash loans in themselves. So, the DeFi use cases are going to grow for sure. They are growing like day by day. People is coming with ideas everywhere, and because now there is the perception that the barrier to capital and to do interesting stuff and getting profit in the middle is really low. So people just entering. More developers are attracted to the system just because of that. That is really good. The thing of the dark side, at the end, what the main consequence is that there is more focus, and there will need to be more focus on security in DeFi protocols to protect about this. And for example, the development of the efficient automated tools like bots to get better arbitrage, etc. And this is not only limited to loans, because here the most powerful feature is actually the atomicity that allow the flash loans. And there are multiple ideas. It's way more experimental because it depends on some other economics. But for example, people is coming with this idea of flash mintable tokens, that is like ERC20 tokens that can be minted randomly for arbitrarily for one transaction. This is still quite experimental. I have my doubts on it, but it's really original. Or these flash minted depositors, that is something that we are actually checking internally, that is about minting our 8 tokens that represent the deposit to send to some place and then return them back. And then those 8 tokens that you actually mint, they have a value at the end of the transaction, but they didn't have at the beginning. It's like a bit of time travel of value. But this is still experimental, and a lot of stuff that needs to come. And well, the validations at the end of the transaction, the atomicity is actually the main powerful thing that the flash loans are based, and a lot of developments are going to come from that. So yeah, we can do questions, but I think it's already finished. You have then the Discord, there's aave.com and the /Discord, and our Telegram. So just join there, ask the questions, or we will be around if you want to have any talk. So thanks.